Hello, beauties. Welcome back to the vlog. This week we've been talking about positivity and its impact on our personal and professional lives. I've shared some stories with you this week about books and authors that have had an impact on my thinking and changed the way that I think about positivity in my life. One of the authors that's had a big impact on how I view myself and how I interact with others is Brené Brown. And initially, I didn't realize she was an author. I was first introduced to her work through a TED Talk that I saw on a YouTube video that someone sent me. And the talk was about the power of vulnerability. And if you haven't seen it, I'll post it in the comments. It's a short clip that you can watch, and it really has some powerful statements. Vulnerability is something that in my years of training in business is not something that I considered as part of being imperative to my success. Vulnerability was something that for a long time I saw as a sign of weakness. Being vulnerable was something that you did in private with people that you trust, where you'd let down your guard and tell them who you were. And to do something like I'm doing right now, where I do this daily vlog and talk with you and share things from my life, is not something I would have ever done a couple years ago when I first was introduced to the work of Brené Brown. In fact, I would have shunned this as something that would have forced me to share private information in a public space, and it's just not me. And for people who've known me a long time and have known me for many years, some of my friends who watch this that I know from high school, middle school, college, know that for a long time I didn't share anything about myself. People didn't know about my family. They didn't know about my history. They didn't know about my fears or my anxieties or my concerns or the things that I hold dear, because I didn't share those pieces of myself. I didn't feel like they belonged in business. I felt like they were something that happened in a private space. And a lot of that comes from family of origin stuff, and a lot of that comes from business training. And then some of that I think is systemic training that happens for women. And that maybe is a different vlog, but that we're not supposed to be vulnerable, that we're not supposed to show signs of weakness, we're not supposed to show emotion of any kind. We're supposed to be these stoic leaders who just power through. And I absolutely lived that life in my career for a long time. And then I listened to and watched the Brené Brown talk on vulnerability. And then I watched it again. And then I listened to it on a podcast as well while I was working out, and listened to it in the car. And I listened to it, I bet, about 5 times, trying to understand what it was that she was saying. And she actually wrote a great book, if you haven't read it, called Daring Greatly: How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. And it's really, I love Daring Greatly. And it comes from a quote, and I'll read you part of this. I won't read the whole thing, from Teddy Roosevelt from the early 1900s. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. And I love that. One of the things that she talks about in her TED Talk is that there's a lot of people who will try to bring you down when you're trying something new, when you're in the arena, so to speak. But one of the things that was most enlightening to me, that took me a long time to understand, is that, and she talks about how we save a seat for these things, is that we allow our self-doubt, our shame, our fear, our guilt to also have a seat in the arena. And that we, being critical of ourselves, actually hinder our own progress forward, right? Sometimes our biggest critic is us. And in my case, that's definitely the case. I've talked about this with you before. I am my number one critic. And there are many people over the course of my career and in my personal life who felt that I was their biggest critic too. And really that comes from my own insecurity speaking through, my own inability to be vulnerable or to say what the real issue is, because I was afraid of saying, wow, my feelings are hurt, or I don't understand why you approached it this way, or help me meet you where you are. Instead, I came out defensive, perhaps, or I presumed things, or I projected my own feelings on others because I was afraid to be vulnerable. And so in listening to her talk and then reading her book, I discovered that the first step is to get in the ring. And the second step is to shut down all of these critics that I have in my own head. Because if I can't look at myself honestly and have empathy for myself, and this is another one of her great talks if you get a chance to see her work, if I can have empathy for myself and give myself permission to fail, then how will anyone else feel like they have permission to fail too? Because I'm in a leadership role and I have to model behavior. And if I have unrelenting standards for myself and I can't fail and I must be perfect all the time and I can never make a mistake, and then if I do make a mistake, I have no empathy for myself and I beat myself up, what standard am I setting for others? Food for thought for you. Share with me today some of the things that you've learned if you've seen her books and her talks, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.